All right. Well, I want to welcome everybody back this week, back to Let's Talk Recovery. And couple things as we're getting started. I've still got my scratchy throat. I've got my cough drops and I've got my green tea. So if my voice starts to go here tonight, you all will know what's going on. You all know how it's worked the last few weeks. And you can see on my screen, I'll introduce my guest tonight, but I have a guest tonight. I know you guys are excited when I have guests. You're not going to have to listen to me ramble on for the entire hour here tonight, but um, I'll let you know a couple things. First of all, you can tell from my background that I am in not my regular location. I'm actually on the road this week, and I'm in St. Louis, Missouri. Been out here spending some time with grandkids and a daughter and son-in-law. And so it is possible you might hear some of my grandkids run across the floor above me while we're interacting here tonight. And but I'm glad that everybody's here. Some of you will be here watching live this evening. Some of you will watch once this video is posted. It'll be up for 30 days on Facebook, and it'll be up for however long YouTube exists. It'll be on YouTube before the night is over, and will be available there. So tonight, tonight I have a guest with me. I have Dan Marsden. Dan and I, all of you guys know that know me and that are around much, know that I spend a lot of time hanging out in coffee shops. And Dan is somebody I met through the coffee shop that I hang out in regularly. And Dan and I have talked some, got to know each other a little bit. Dan is here with me tonight. Dan is an officer with the Louisville Police Department. And Dan agreed to come on here with me tonight. And what we're going to be talking about tonight is addiction, crime, and homelessness, and connections that are present there. And so I want to give Dan a minute to introduce himself, tell you guys a little bit about himself. I do want to put a plug in, and I've asked Dan to say something about it, but Dan had a book come out. I think here it's been in the past year, maybe about a year ago. And so I'd like Dan to tell us a little bit about that and maybe a little bit about himself, if that's okay. I'm glad you're with me, Dan.
I appreciate it. Yeah. Hi, everybody. I'm Dan. And so I was born and raised in Germany and came to the U.S. when I was 16 with a one-way ticket. I was left at the airport. This was back in the late 90s, 97, Portland, Oregon. And my first day in America, I was homeless. I was left at the airport in Portland. Family's supposed to pick me up. They just never showed up. And I never met them in person to this day, never met them. And so the next 15 years after that was really just a long struggle trying to survive, struggling with food insufficiency, basically, certain levels of homelessness as well, and had a ton of struggles. And as Ron said, I wrote a book about that whole process. The book is called Redeem the Dream, which is the name of my nonprofit organization that I had before becoming a police officer. I started a nonprofit working with marginalized youth in Louisville and in Southern Indiana. And organization was called Redeem the Dream. And so that's what the name of the book is. And it basically starts when I land in the US, and it has questions for personal reflection at the end of each chapter, and kind of it's me processing my story, and I hope it helps somebody else process their own story, and kind of shows the ups and downs, and really kind of speaks to God's faithfulness even in the middle of the mess, that we can experience sometime. And you can get it anywhere, Amazon, wherever. Book Baby is the publisher, and if you go to bookbaby.com or something, you can just find it there. But if you just Google it, it'll be everywhere. Redeem the Dream. The subtitle is called The Song in Your Heart. So that's that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's awesome, man. I've heard a little bit of your story, but I'm always excited, man, to hear bits and pieces, little bits and pieces more of people's stories. Now, I'm going to have some questions for you tonight. You've got freedom, Dan, as we're talking here. If you want to spend some time in an area or touch on something that I don't bring up, but I want to let all of you that are listening, whether you're listening here live or whether you are watching on YouTube or Facebook, if you're watching live, as always, you'll be able to post comments here in the chat on Facebook. And if we have a chance, we'll get to any questions that you have. Be glad to answer those or try to answer those or respond to those. But if you watch this later when it's posted and you have questions or comments, stick those in the comments there. And I try to respond and get back to people in the comments um, uh, there on the videos after they're posted. And so, yeah, so some of what I'm interested in finding out from you about, Dan, you're a police officer with Louisville Police Department. And my understanding, if I'm correct, is you actually, a part of what you do focuses on the homeless community some there. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah. What's called a division resource officer. So in Louisville, geographically, the police department is divided into 8 different divisions. The division is basically a certain geographical area within Jefferson County. So it's the Louisville Metro Police Department. So we have the whole county, Jefferson County. Within Jefferson County, there are multiple other departments that we're kind of the main one. And so I'm in the what's called the 6th division, which is a pretty large geographical area, and I'm the resource officer. Each division has 2, some have 3, but I work alone. We're just so short staffed, so I'm the only resource officer without a partner in LMPD right now, and it's basically quality of life. But homelessness, dealing with the homeless population, is a big part of my job. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Well, I want to spend some time talking about that tonight and addiction, but where I'd like to start is I'd like to just start with the topic of crime and addiction in general. And so I'm kind of wondering, from your experience as a police officer, um, how often how often do you find that addiction is involved when the police respond to crime? Is it common for you to interact with people when you get calls that appear to be on something, appear to be intoxicated or on something, or that addiction is involved in some way in the crime that's been committed?
Yeah.
What's been your experience with that?
It's almost always the case, and more often than not, it's alcohol. A lot of times it makes people aggressive. Of course, everybody knows we have a lot of DUIs, and I've been to several fatal crashes that were caused by drunk drivers, and that can be
Mhm.
pretty memorable, especially when um, kids are involved and they lose their life because someone was drinking and was selfish and got behind the wheel and took someone's life. Like one was like Thunder actually a couple of years ago. Thunder over Louisville is the largest fireworks show in America, and there was a group of high school kids driving home. They were not drinking, and it was around midnight, and they were at a red light. And there was an intoxicated driver going about 80 miles an hour and didn't stop and just ran right into him. And there was 2 kids sitting, a driver, one in the front seat, and then one kid sitting in the back, and the kid that was sitting in the back got smushed and squeezed to death. And was his parents showed up on scene and having to tell them that their kid is probably not going to make it. Is not going to make it. That's a lot. And you just see the person that's addicted or that's drinking that just sits there and still doesn't even know what's going on, and
Mhm.
kind of nothing happened to him, just looking around like like it's no big deal. And an 18-year-old just lost their life. And actually, this kid was actually an illegal immigrant that came from, I think, some country where they had this crazy story where they were like trekking for hours and hours, and made it here to the U.S. and thought they're going to have a better life. And he was about a week or two away from graduating from high school, and then that happened.
Mm.
Uh, and so that's kind of memorable. But a lot of times, of course, with domestic violence, usually there's drugs involved. There's someone is either high on something, or whether it's meth, cocaine, or it's marijuana, alcohol. Usually is always the common denominator. And then um, anytime you deal with homeless population, there's usually a lot of mental health and drug addictions involved. I mean, it's yeah. If you can take drug addiction out of the equation, you'd have a lot more peaceful society. That's for sure.
Yeah, yeah. I hear that. Um, it back in the day, back in the late 80s and early 90s, I worked with a drug rehab program in Louisville. It was a national program, a nationwide program, and I was executive director of their Louisville facility for a few years back in the 80s. And but addiction is, it's like I'm here in St. Louis, and it's just addiction, drugs, is a common conversation here. Um, my son-in-law is a pastor here in St. Louis, and uh, I was out here a couple weeks ago and attended his church on a Sunday, and some of the congregation know that I'm a certified addiction recovery coach, and a group of about 3 members from his congregation just came up to me after the service and wanted to talk for a little bit about what they see taking place in the community here with drug and alcohol problems. And then some of them sharing personal stories or stories with family members. And so you mentioned several things already. You mentioned alcohol. Alcohol, I think, would probably be the most common issue that somebody would come across. And what other kind of drugs are you seeing on the street now? What It seems like things change. Back in my day, cocaine was really big for a while, but I hear it's not as popular as it used to be. What do you see out there now? What?
I mean, we have some fentanyl, of course, and then so you got to be careful with that. And meth and cocaine is becoming a little bit more popular too, I think.
Hmm.
But quite a bit of meth too.
Hmm. Yeah.
As far as
And yeah, you mentioned a minute ago too with mental health issues, and my experience has been that a lot of times drug and alcohol issues are connected to the mental health issues that are present in the community, also. And uh, whether the drug and alcohol use comes as a result of a mental health issue, or whether it plays a role in creating an ongoing mental health issue. I know that's seems to be a rising problem across the board. Um, Mental health and drugs and that kind of thing.
that equals homelessness usually.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, yeah.
storm.
Well, um, in your experience and what you observe, how would you say does does addiction drive criminal behavior? And if so, how does addiction drive criminal behavior? What, you have any thoughts on that?
I mean, people have to feed their addiction, and so then they become so selfish that they don't care what they do to another person, or stealing and lying and all that other stuff, that we see a lot of times in even in domestic relationships, when someone's addicted, it usually ruins everything because now you're willing to lie, cheat, steal, and everything else to feed your addiction. And
Mm-hmm.
a lot of times that leaves people homeless, and then they develop more and more mental health issues and become impossible to help almost. And we just don't have the facilities anywhere really to house people permanently, and family members get exhausted. They can't just keep taking someone in that has these issues, and so then they're just you know they're always on the street, and you arrest them and they'll be back out before your shift's over. So it's it's a
Mm-hmm.
nobody wants to deal with it. It's one of the most, honestly, probably one of the most annoying things for police officers to have to deal with the homeless population. If you
Mm-hmm.
people are honest, a lot of people don't enjoy that part because it's a
Mm-hmm.
cycle repeating itself, and there's really no good answer, it seems like.
Yeah, yeah. I was uh I was meeting with a father and stepmother of a young man just recently that's in jail in southern Indiana. Um, and the son's in jail because of um, charges related to drug use and to criminal behavior, a robbery and some things, in an attempt to obtain money to purchase drugs. And in that conversation with the father and the stepmother, um, it's a painful interaction to see the pain and the hurt in their eyes and on their face. As the father told me as we were talking, he said, I love my son with everything in me, but I can't allow him anywhere near my home. And I hear things like that a lot, um, with addiction, with alcoholism, and with that kind of thing. I love them. I can't allow them to be here. They cause too much harm to the family, and 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 um, and theft and that kind of thing there. Yeah.
Yeah, that's crazy. I deal with landlords a lot, that house people on Section 8 where, they're basically on the brink of homelessness, where they may only have to pay $50 a month or something, and they get their social security check, but they can't even make that $50 a month because as soon as they get their money, they just spend it on their addiction. And then they get
Hmm.
on the street because they can't even pay that small amount on a regular basis.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Um, what are your thoughts? The people that listen here regularly know that I've had my own struggle with addictive behaviors, process addiction, and I ended up spending time in jail and ultimately time in prison. Um, I'm kind of interested. One of the things that surprised me in my interaction with the police, and then also with the jail and court and prison system, you could speak on the part of the police maybe or on your personal part, but one of the things that surprised me is um, I felt like I was treated well. That's going to sound odd. I was telling somebody recently, I had an opportunity a year or two ago to meet with the prosecutor that prosecuted my case and played a role in me going away. But I actually had an opportunity. One of the arresting officers, he was a state trooper in Indiana that gave me a ride from my house down to the jail when I was arrested. Um, I had an opportunity to interact with him in a coffee shop, and uh, and uh, um, and he did not remember me. He wouldn't have any reason to remember me specifically, but uh, but we took a few minutes and talked, and he was interested in me. he was interested in knowing how things had gone. I guess where I'm going with this, I'm rambling, but what goes on in your head and in your heart when you interact with people and you see the things that they're struggling with, but you see the chaos and the harm that it's causing at the same time.
Yeah, I think like with me too, like because my personal struggles, coming to the U.S. and basically had, it's my own struggles with homelessness and stuff, and getting into this profession a little bit later, I think makes me a little bit more compassionate, I think, and most officers, like you said, I mean, they're nice, they treat people with respect, and they really do want to help, and it's it really is that way. That's kind of been my experience. And then of course we see so much trauma, and it's easy to get jaded because you see it over and over again. They say like an average person might have like 7 to 8 traumatic experiences in a lifetime, like really kind of what you would consider like a critical incident, whether it's a divorce or a traumatic death or something. And a police officer in their career will have 200 of those. And so like your brain is not supposed to, handle that. So that people deal with it differently. So police officers have their own whole own hidden struggle, trying to deal with their own mental health in that department. But I mean, to me, I always found like when you're nice to people, you get so much further. And I've had like you really need to learn to not to get emotionally hijacked and to treat everybody with kindness, regardless of what they're struggling with or regardless of what evil they may have just committed, because my
Mm-hmm.
job as a police officer is not to judge you or to be mean to you. It's to enforce the law. And then the court system is who judges you and who's supposed to like go through that process with you. That's not my job.
Mm-hmm.
And even, it's, I, I had some one crazy experience where there was a guy he just shot and killed 2 people in a gas station. His ex girlfriend and her new boyfriend at like 7 p.m. in broad daylight. And then I think I was a second on scene, and he was still there, and I had to grab him, and I happened to have him in the back of my car, and um, just had a conversation. I was treated him with respect, even though he just killed 2 people, and he
Mm-hmm.
he was freaking out back there, and he was saying stuff. I'm really a nice guy, officer. Like my mind's like, oh man, you just killed 2 people, bro. Try
Yep.
convincing the
Yep.
judge. But it's like, and I was fine. And I think if you treat people with kindness, it just goes so much further. I had a lot of really positive interactions with people, and I think that's the favorite part of my job is when you're able to really kind of encourage someone and help someone, or maybe even buy somebody a meal or give them a ride, um, and just kind of be a light in on their worst day. Yeah. So
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
it's
Yeah.
always very, very respectful, and it's very important not to escalate, and it helps you not escalate situations. So
Yeah. Yeah. I yeah. I know we were talking before we went live, and one of the things I mentioned is just how surprised I've been over the years, me having served time in prison, spent 9 months in county jail before getting moved to prison, and then the interaction with the police and um, law enforcement. And uh, I remember it was, I don't know, 6 or 8 months after I was released from prison, and I was walking through town. I walk a lot. That's played an important role in my recovery, walking. And I was walking, and I heard somebody yell my name. Somebody hollered, "Hey, Mr. Williams!" And I'm turned around looking, to see who it is, and it was a sheriff's deputy. And man, I'd been in prison for a couple of years. Now, why in the world would he remember my name? Because we did interact some, but not a lot. But he remembered my name and stopped and called out to me, and we talked for a few minutes. he wanted to know, how long have you been back, and how are things going for you? Are you working? What's going on? And um, yeah, I'll say it again. It amazed me because in my mind and having served time, I know not everybody that's locked up is jerks, but a lot of people are. And I just know the kind of people that police officers have to work with, have to interact with on a regular basis. And one of the biggest surprises for me was how nice a lot of them have been.
Well, that's good to hear.
Yeah, yeah. I actually, sorry, I'm going down a little rabbit trail, but the prosecutor that handled my case, he is now the county prosecutor there where he's at. He was a deputy prosecutor back then. But I ran into him getting breakfast one morning and ended up talking to him. And I said, "Hey, man, are you so and so?" And gave his name. And he said, "Yeah." And I told him, I said, "You wouldn't remember me, but maybe 10 or 12 years ago, dude, you sent me to prison for 2 years." And I could see him physically. He shifted away from me when I made that statement. I could see him tense up. And I told him, I said, "No, man," I said, "I want you to know, dude, I think you were pretty fair with me." And we ended up sitting and talking for probably a half hour. And the conversation with him opened my eyes to law enforcement and the criminal justice system as a whole, because he shared with me, he said, when we were done talking, he said, "I don't know that I've ever had somebody that I sent to prison thank me for what I did." And but he told me, he said, "When you think about it," he said, "everybody I meet with, it's a bad situation. They are either a victim of a crime or they are somebody who's committed a crime." And he said, "So every time I meet with somebody, it's a bad situation." And he told me, he said, "I appreciate you sitting and talking with me today for a few minutes." And I appreciated him sitting and listening to me. So anyway,
Yeah,
uh,
it's so true. Like when you talk about victims, um, hello, Ron.
you're freezing up a little bit there. I'm hearing you, but
Can you hear me? Sorry.
I can. And if this starts to, oh, there we go. All right. Well, I think he'll jump back in here in just a minute. And so, yep, there he is.
All
All
right.
right.
Okay. Okay. Sorry. Geez, I don't know what just happened. So funny.
Yeah. If it becomes an issue, I may get you to shut your video off. Sometimes on these Zoom calls, if the video shuts down, it makes the connection better. So,
Oh,
but anyway,
sounds good. I don't even know what I was saying, but like yeah, interaction with law enforcement is usually a part of people's rescue. Is what I'm saying. Like when you're dealing with I'm really passionate about human trafficking space, and there's a lot of discussion on like not criminalizing victims, and what does it
mhm.
look like to criminalize a victim, and a lot of opposing opinions on that. And there's been a lot of studies done on like what makes people leave a life of exploitation. A lot of times being cited or even being arrested or having certain interaction with law enforcement is the beginning of someone's freedom, so um, sometimes that kind of interaction with law enforcement, even if it includes a citation or an arrest or a detention, that is the beginning of someone's freedom. So
Mhm.
it's not always black and white where it's like, oh, you criminalize someone, you hurt them. Sometimes you help them.
Mhm.
And it's looking back at my situation. I was in 2009 or 2000, I think it was 2009, 2010. I was interrogated by the feds in California in relation to marriage fraud, and where I was basically exploited to marry someone for money because I was going to be homeless, and they offered me $10,000 not to be on the street if I married their cousin, type of thing, you know.
Yep.
And I'm so glad that at that time, like those federal investigators did not criminalize me at all and let me go and
Hmm.
recognize me as a victim in that sense, because that would have been a serious felony. That would have been, you know, you're talking about years in, you know, penitentiary type of thing. And so it's really important for law enforcement to understand, like, when, you know, to do what's best for the victim, you know. And sometimes
Hmm.
it's a citation, sometimes it's not giving him a felony in my case, you know, because I look back, and that was the last time I struggled with food insufficiency, was that interaction with law enforcement. The last time I was really struggle with homelessness and things like that. And it was a huge turning point in my life. And
Hmm.
I never forgot that. And so I'm trying to always, when I interact with people, think of like what's best for them, you know. And I
Hmm.
know some officers are all about how many arrests can I get, and stats, but that doesn't necessarily reflect how well you serve the community, you know. And the rest isn't always what's best for somebody. You just gotta. It takes a lot of wisdom and just, I guess, discernment to realize what's best for somebody, you know.
Hmm. Yeah.
And it's not always black and white.
Yeah. Um, in talking about homelessness, how closely, as a resource officer, and you work with the homeless community, how closely connected would you say, how closely connected is homelessness and addiction in what you see?
Oh yeah, that's a huge connection. I mean, it's I don't know if I ever met a homeless person that wasn't addicted to something. You know, that's, I mean, if it's one thing to be homeless for a week or a couple of days or maybe a month, you know, it's another thing if you're like homeless for years or an extended period of time. You know, we all, and there's levels of homelessness, right? I like it's, you know, if you sleep on someone's couch, you don't have a normal address, you know, you're considered homeless, really. But
Mhm.
actually, sleeping under a bridge is another level, I guess. You know, so there's levels to that. And if you're actually under a bridge and you're sleeping somewhere for months, and there's always mental health and addiction issues. I've never seen it not be, because a lot of times those people, they don't want services, because the first thing I do is offer them services. You know, we have Louisville has so many services. You know, we have a whole homeless outreach, you know, staff like from the city that come out and try to place them in situations. And now we have a whole police unit too, for called Public Spaces. That's, I think it's 4 full-time officers and a sergeant, and that's all they do is only, you know, basically deal with homeless. And we have so many resources. And what we find is, like, people don't want resources; they want that life. And a lot of times, there's so many enabling. A lot of times, it's churches that enable them. You know, where I
Mhm.
start to see. I mean, you never catch me working homeless ministry after doing what I do, you know, because it's, I feel like a lot of times I feel like, man, they're not helping necessarily, you know, because you talk to homeless people, it's like, why change? I can get a free meal every single day somewhere. I know where to go and get a free meal every day in Louisville, all 7 days a week. I don't have to work, you know. So
Mhm.
there's free stuff for them every day to to at least keep them alive.
Mhm.
And that's all they want, you know, and then just feed their addiction. And they don't
Mhm.
want to get a job, you know, they don't want to live indoors, a lot of them. So
Mhm.
that's kind of been my experience. And you know, and sometimes when the mental health gets out of control, they become dangerous. Sometimes, you know, it's like I've had people raise axes on me and swing, you know, metal poles on me and stuff like that. You just never know when you interact with them. And that's why also people don't realize they might want to be kind and do homeless outreach. Well, you don't never know what you're walking up to, you know. So
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah. Yeah. I uh I know I didn't experience homelessness to the degree that you have shared about that you experienced, but I know there was a period I lived out of my vehicle after my divorce years ago, and there was a period after my release from prison when I was on the verge of homelessness, excuse me, on the verge of homelessness pretty often, um, in trying to find work. And I just, I would think that when homelessness is prolonged, I don't know, maybe I'm making a bad connection here, but I know there are people, because of my experience with prison, I know there are people that come out of prison and really struggle with reconnecting and living in society after prison life. And I wonder if there's a similar struggle with people that experience homelessness for an extended period of time, where they just don't know how or don't know if they're able to fit back into society again. And that would have to, in my mind, I'm no expert on this, but in my mind, I would think that would have to play into mental health issues and
Oh,
potential addiction.
it's constantly proves to be true. And I'm sorry, it's kind of getting dark. I'm trying my best to keep it light. Uh,
You're fine.
but I mean, just now, I mean, a perfect example. I don't know if I can say location and names, but I mean, there's this new facility that was just built in Louisville where I work, and it's brand new. And I don't know if it's funded partially by tax dollars, partially through like a large charity, but it's meant to house homeless people. And and it reaches out to homeless people that have been on the street, I think, for multiple years, and all kinds of issues. And this was like, I mean, it's a brand new building. It's like an apartment building, and it's like they're all like little one bedroom, like mini apartments and stuff. And I mean, it's nice, but you put these people in there, and we have so many problems like you wouldn't believe. And they have full time staff, they have counselors in there, they have all kinds of help in there, but it's like, man, they bust the stuff in there. They treat it like garbage. They clog the toilets. There's always all kinds of like different types of violence and different issues, and it's just eh, they're destroying the businesses in the area. There's like it sits on a parking lot where there's other businesses, like a place that has like tax people and different businesses that are now shutting down because they lost so much business because these homeless people are just roaming around acting a fool like in front of their business, and people don't want to buy from them anymore. People don't want to be their clients anymore, so they have to leave. And
Mm-hmm.
we've been sounding the alarm as police, since the beginning. Before it even went in, we told them this is going to be a huge problem. It's not going to work, and it's taken so many police resources. It's unbelievable. Like it's craziness. And
Mm-hmm.
I think that at the end of the day, there's some people that are actually making a lot of money. So it's not really all nonprofit for everybody. And
Mm-hmm.
it's kind of political, I guess, a little in some ways. And I'm just seeing that. I was like, man, that's not this. That can't be this. That's not the solution. So I don't know if there really is a great solution. I mean, the people that work there that manage some of those parts. I mean, I talked to them. They almost broke down crying because these people treated them so bad. Like spit in their face because they don't want to give them cigarettes or something.
Mm-hmm.
And or scratch their cars up and stuff. They'll give them drugs. And yeah, so I wish I had the answer, but that's a result of addiction and homelessness. So,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and
Yeah.
and I think if we can overcome addiction and mental health issues, we'd have a lot less homeless people. And if you were homeless and were mentally and emotionally healthy, it'd be a lot easier to help you. you know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. 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 I know in the recovery world, um, there's a lot of focus on isolation. In fact, there's a little catchphrase in the recovery world. It comes from a TED talk from a number of years ago, um, where a guy made a statement. He said, the opposite of addiction is not sobriety. The opposite of addiction is healthy community. And
Hmm.
I know that in addiction work, um, when people struggle with addiction, and anybody that wants to can feel free to argue with me in the comments here. That's okay. But in the world of addiction, when we live in addiction, we live in isolation. And for the most part, that's a choice. Some of that is not by choice. We get isolated. Friends walk away after a while in our addiction and that kind of thing. But the majority of it is we choose to live in isolation. We don't want to open up to anybody. We don't want to admit vulnerability. We we um we don't want to talk, especially about struggles or problems. And I would think that that same type of thing has to be amplified when somebody's living homeless. Um,
Mm.
you know that uh, I never want to say it's man, it's so difficult for me to admit that I have a need. Um, and I know for some people it's easy for them, and they're looking for a handout or that kind of thing. But um, being able to be open and communicate with people, and I just picture that. And again, maybe I'm making connections to my incarceration that are not valid, but because of my incarceration, I isolated. I assumed that nobody was going to want to hear about my struggles. Nobody was going to want to hear about my problems. And even when they told me they did, I wasn't going to open up about that. And that feeds into that addictive mentality and that addictive lifestyle. Um, I just think it's impossible for us until we're able to open up, be vulnerable, um, be honest. Um, we won't make progress. And I'm thinking through while I'm listening to you. I'm thinking through with the homeless community if there's that same kind of thing. Yeah, if there's that fear of vulnerability, that fear of opening up, maybe being accustomed to being pushed away.
Mm.
Ramblings in my head there.
Yeah, it's so difficult, and it's hard for like for as someone who's constantly working with the homeless. Like a lot of times, my experience really is like they don't want, they're so far into that life that they don't want a different life. They just want
Mm-hmm.
to be left alone in the woods or something, and they get mad at me. He's like, "Hey, this is not your
Mm-hmm.
property, dude." you know,
Yep. Yep.
uh,
Yep.
and it's we find a bunch of stolen items in their tents all the time.
Mm-hmm.
They have drug paraphernalia and like 20 phones and all kinds of stuff, and it's yeah, it is it's vicious, man. It's nasty.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
As a
Yeah.
society, it's like you said. I love what you said about healthy community. I mean, like if healthy community is the key, right? It's the key to being less vulnerable,
Mm-hmm.
the key to healing.
Mm-hmm.
It really is, and yeah, it's who we surround ourselves with,
Yeah. I'm
and
kind of wondering in your interaction with the homeless, is there anything that you can identify that does seem to work or does seem to be beneficial there? Um,
think I think the only people that I really like are people that I mean that are just down on their luck for a short term. They're the ones that will want help, and you can kind of help along. I feel like once they cross a certain line, it's man. I mean, I guess God can provide a miracle, but it's I
mm-hmm.
really don't see that. Like if when someone's been out there for years, it's really hard um to reverse that. Because a lot of times they don't have family connections, or they ruin all their friendships. They ruin all their family relationships. There's
Mm-hmm.
nowhere for them to go, and all the programs. A lot of times they've been kicked out of a lot of programs too. Like I just say, hey, why don't you go to this place? Why don't you go to that place? Oh, they kicked me out. Oh, they kicked me out. So it's
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
like, well, you kind of did that to yourself.
Yep. Yep.
And you feel bad for them, but it's tough, man.
Yep. Yeah.
And yeah, it's really tough. A lot of them have some criminal records too, and
Mm-hmm.
and Like, yeah, it's a mess, man.
Yeah.
But not to say that anybody can't get out of it. But I mean, there's one particular guy I keep thinking of, and I mean, I know his name, I don't know his information because we arrested him like 30 times,
Mm-hmm.
and he keeps coming back to the same stuff, man. And yeah, it's like I couldn't imagine him ever being any different. He always comes back to the same gas station. He goes to jail,
Mm-hmm.
he'll end up at the same gas station, and you don't even want to know, the stuff I seen him do, and it's just so gross. And it's like, bro, and yeah, and it's yeah, and they become violent. This particular individual, like I caught him one time. He had a metal pipe and went to a gas station. He was swinging on an employee that was 7 months pregnant, and just he would always dump over all the trash cans and
Mm-hmm.
defecate and around and do other things and just um yeah, and every time we take him to jail, he'll be in the back of the police car trying to kick out the windows and scream and do that whole kind of thing. But and like literally he'll be out before his shift's over and he'll be back. Somehow he find his way back.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
it's been that way for years.
Yep.
So like maybe I'm just jaded, but I feel like, man, I don't know if this dude's ever, like what could help a guy that's that far into it. And I mean, there are mental health issues, there's addiction, there's
Mm-hmm.
hopelessness, you know. There's probably also
Yeah.
learned helplessness and all that kind of stuff. But I mean, people like that are really hard to love too. I mean, like even if he has family members that care about him, he'd probably drive him nuts in about 2 days, and they'd be like, "You gotta go."
Yep. Yep.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So,
What,
and I guess,
what,
it's
no, go ahead.
like,
Um,
okay, yeah. So I feel like, and then you need to numb yourself, right? And so you're in those situations, and so then that drives that addiction. Now, whatever you fight,
mm-hmm.
you gotta do that, so you don't face reality.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. With law enforcement, with police officers, and with people that are struggling with addiction in general, alcohol, drugs, whatever it may be, um, are there tools that you have when you're responding to somebody that's that's intoxicated, that is high? Are there tools that are available to officers when they're dealing with somebody um,
I mean, we go through
has a
training.
drug problem?
Yeah, I mean, we go through a bunch of trainings called CIT training, crisis intervention training, where
Mm-hmm.
just specifically designed for people with that are like in a mental health crisis. A lot of times it means addiction or kind of severe kind of mental health issues, and um, it's a fine line where it's like, okay,
Mm-hmm.
when does that person become a threat, or is that person just in a crisis? And when is it dangerous? When can we kind of de-escalate? But
Mm-hmm.
yeah, so we have quite a bit of training that we do in that area, and then um, we there's so many resources, numbers that we can call in different nonprofits and different victim services and addiction services. They can be connected to so many different places if they want to be connected. I think
Mm-hmm.
that help is certainly available. So
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah.
Um, I I shared, one of my daughters has been on Let's Talk Recovery with me, and she recognizes her interaction with police as being her gift of desperation in recovery, and really was the beginning of her recovery and work, and the beginning of the success that she has experienced in her struggle with addiction. And so I know that as a police officer, other than maybe testifying when somebody goes to court or something that you've arrested, I don't know that you have interactions with people once they move into the court system um, after an arrest, but um, Louisville, where you're at, is where my daughter was arrested. I was the lucky guy that got to pick her up from the jail at like 3 a.m.
Nice.
after her arrest, you know, and I was fortunate because of my background in a recovery work and addiction work. When she was arrested and I picked her up, I had between her arrest that afternoon and the time I picked her up, I had been able to line up a treatment program in East Chicago to check her into. And I wanted to get her out of the area where she had been struggling with addiction. I didn't want her being able to find something to use within 10 minutes of where she was at when she got released. And so I got her into treatment in East Chicago. But the Louisville court system, the Jefferson County court system, really, and this was her first charge. Wasn't the first time she deserved to be locked up, but the first time she had been locked up. And the Jefferson County court system um, was very willing when they saw her doing work. They were willing to work with her in her court appearances and ultimately with her charges. And um, what are your thoughts? Is that something that you are aware of at all with what happens with people after the arrest? Do you
I mean,
think that there are? Go ahead.
yeah, I mean Jefferson County. I mean, like it's definitely favors um people come to Jefferson County to commit crimes because they know there's very little consequences, and I guess uh that could be good and bad, you know. And
Mm-hmm.
I'm glad that they erred on the side of grace when grace was deserved, but a lot of times they give too much grace to even violent
Mm-hmm.
criminals, you know. uh,
Mm-hmm.
to where that's been very discouraging for a lot of investigators and law enforcement officers in Jefferson County. Just to be honest, that they do a lot of work, even with some violent offenders, and then they just get a slap on the wrist and they come right back out, or they everything gets
Mm-hmm.
dropped and things, you know. And so I guess that can be good or bad. You know, I feel like when it comes to situations like that, err on the side of grace. I mean, I always do that too when I come in contact with someone. The only time I ever gave someone like a DUI is like when they like ran into a house or ran into trees and everything. There's nothing I can help you with at that point, you know. But
Mm-hmm.
if there's a way where someone can be picked up or get a ride home, you know, I
Mm-hmm.
just I think erring on the side of grace when it comes to those things is so important because that those these implications, you know, they affect the rest of your life, your job, your career, your ability to provide for your kids and your family. And I think having compassion on that and giving people second chances is very important for sure, especially when it comes to these nonviolent kind of things and addiction, you know, because let's face it, I tell people all the time, we're all just one stupid decision away from disaster. It doesn't matter who we are.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
and I think that should keep all of us very humble, you know.
Yeah. Yeah. I had somebody when I was, it may have been the prosecutor, somebody in my court hearing when I was at sentencing, somebody made a comment, Mr. Williams, we're just convinced that you had a severe case of extreme temporary stupidity. And I've kind of carried that. I still can have cases of extreme stupidity from time to time, but none of them have gotten me in as much trouble as that time did. And so, yeah. And in the instance with my daughter, it was a first offense for her. Um, uh, and so I was very thankful. And I would have to say too, she made a decision to turn things around after her arrest. And she's in long-term recovery today. She's living down in Florida. Dan has a good job, very active in the recovery community as a sponsor and working with to help other people come through. And so, um, what would do you ever have an opportunity do you have opportunities to see or hear about success stories where you get calls and then you hear that they did turn things around or they are doing well? Do you have opportunities to see instances like that?
I mean, very rare. Um, the younger they are, the more that can happen. Like when you're dealing with juveniles and stuff. But with adults, like it's really rare. I can't really even think on the top of my head someone that's been stuck in those things for years.
Mm-hmm.
Um, you hear testimonies at church sometimes, so I know they're out there, but out on the
Yep.
street, it's so rare.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why I think it's important to get to the kids while they're still young, while they're young to help them change those generational curses, so to speak, if it's in their family, help them make better decisions
Mm-hmm.
and catch it early. Early intervention, I guess is what they call it. They teach us that as police officers early, try to find signs in each other because a lot of law enforcement struggle with addiction. Because we
Mm-hmm.
deal with all this trauma, and then people compartmentalize. This is my life at work, and this is my life at home. And I mean, there's all kinds of addictions going on behind closed doors with law enforcement, I'm sure, and I know this, and so we're always challenged to do early intervention with each other and check in with each other. Like police suicide is a big thing. We just had a few months ago a girl that I work with that committed suicide, and so
Mm-hmm.
um, it's not it's prevalent just as much within our own ranks. It just looks different.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I've known over the years, I've known a number of pastors or a number of counselors and therapists that um, have done ride-alongs with police officers and that kind of thing, where the police department allowed that, some ride-alongs. The ones I'm thinking about off the top of my head were smaller, a lot smaller forces than Louisville, but where they yeah, pastors, a couple pastor friends of mine and a couple counselor friends of mine that did ride-alongs to help with interactions with people that the officers were having to interact with, but also it played a real role with offering care, I think, for officers too, giving officers an opportunity to have somebody to talk to and to process things with. Because I know, um, I know officers deal with a lot. That's why it always surprised me how many of the people I interacted with in law enforcement, in jail, in prison, I was just amazed at how many of them were nice people when I thought about what they had to deal with on a regular basis. And so, um, yeah, that has to create a lot of stress. Hey, here's a question for you. I don't know if you're interested in speaking to this at all, but what kind of impact does the work that you do have on your family life?
Yeah, it's been real tough, to be honest. I'm kind of it's been quite the journey, and again, it's like it's so hard being in law enforcement to be really honest about those things because you can't show that kind of weakness. You don't know who you can trust, or you say something publicly, then someone picks it up and uses it against you, and
Mm-hmm.
it's like they have all these counseling services available. Nobody wants to talk. It was like, I don't know if you're going to say something. I deal with liars all the time. Like, how is this going to affect me negatively? You bottle this in.
Yep,
And,
yep.
uh, and it's been, yeah, to be honest, it's been real hard. I feel like I aged a ton the last 6 years, from what I've been through and what I've seen. And a lot of times the internal stress can be just as much as what you deal on the outside. And
Mm-hmm.
there's so many dynamics and so many parts of the culture that's probably not healthy, to be honest. uh,
Mm-hmm.
because people don't deal with their stuff in a healthy way. Um,
Hmm.
and so, yeah, yeah, I'd be lying if I say it didn't affect my family because it does, it does. And I'm trying to work on that. I'm always trying to work on that, but um, that's why I don't know how long, like who knows, but it definitely plays a role, and you have to be super intentional to not let that be the case. But it's really hard. I have young children, so you come home and you just want to relax, and everybody's screaming and yelling. And I'm like, I don't want to talk to anybody. I just want to
Yep.
sit
Yep.
out, nothing. My wife's like, why aren't you helping out? And I'm like,
Yeah.
I pay the
Yeah.
bills. That's all I want to do, and I don't want to do nothing else. So yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, it's not easy for sure, but I guess it's a calling in a sense, but I think it's important to know when to leave too, because a lot of people, I think they overstay, and then it
Hmm.
wrecks them mentally and emotionally because it's so much of their identity. Like, I think it's important to know when it's time to go. And that's
Hmm.
for everybody, sometimes one critical incident, you should probably not do this job anymore. Like, a lot of people that had critical incidents and then they just kind of left, and that was probably the wise thing.
Yep. Yeah. Yeah. Well, we're coming up on the end of our time here, and I do really appreciate you being here and talking with me tonight, giving us an opportunity to talk through and discuss some of these things. Um, I know you've already mentioned the importance of early intervention, um, and uh, that kind of thing. Is there anything, as we're wrapping things up, that you'd like to put out there, maybe as a word to people that are listening, maybe people that have family members that are homeless, that are struggling with addiction, and they're struggling with knowing what to do with that? Do you have anything that you'd be interested in closing with that?
Man, that's really deep. I think that it's important to be compassionate. You know, um, and I do believe in the power of prayer. And just understanding, like, that our own sin is not any less than theirs.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes it's easy. Oh, I'm not like them because I got a house, they don't, or whatnot. But it doesn't. My sin is just as bad as their sin, and I don't know what got them to their point. And everybody has their breaking point.
Mm-hmm.
Like we have a breaking point, and if we had to deal with that breaking point right now, we might lose everything we have and be in the same situation. So I think kind of having that kind of perspective really always helps. And
Mm-hmm.
um and just maybe just being grateful, that by God's grace we're in a better situation. But I think being compassionate and trying to ask the right questions and not giving up on people is important, because those people a lot of those people think everybody gave up on them, and so
Yeah. Yeah.
it there's really no easy answer. And like I said, I see so much of it, it's really hard not to be jaded.
Mm-hmm. It is difficult, and I see multiple sides as I work with addiction. I do have an opportunity because of the work that I do. I do have an opportunity to see people who are able to find freedom and find new life, but I also see people that don't, and I see families that put themselves through a lot, questioning, "Am I wrong by having to set boundaries? Am I wrong because I have to put a stop to some things?" And that's a part of the idea that life isn't easy.
Oh, you
And,
got boundaries. Whew. Yeah, we took people into our house, when we had a nonprofit, and teenagers and stuff. I wish I would have never taken in. So, like, I would have, like, I would never take in anybody right now into my family, because I've seen how
mhm,
destruction that's like. Boundaries are super important, and like we're not anybody's savior, and it's not our responsibility to save them. And you
yep,
know, we can't let people guilt trip us and saying it's your fault I'm suffering. It's not. We're not. God is their savior. We're not their
mhm,
savior. Yeah,
yeah,
boundaries. Whew, yeah, that's tough, but yeah, that's a really good one right there.
yeah,
Gotta.
yeah.
Yeah.
And there is help available. There's help available for people that need help.
Yeah.
Um, if they're willing to accept it. Sometimes there are boundaries included with that help, and that kind of thing. But I thank you for being here tonight. I thank you for talking with me, sharing your experience and talking through these things.
Time flies, man.
And,
It's already been
yeah. And what was the title of your book again?
Redeem the Dream.
Redeem the Dream.
Redeem the Dream. You Google it, you'll find it, and yeah, it's an ebook and a regular book and all that stuff. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Awesome. Well, I want to thank everybody that's been here tonight. Those of you that have been listening, those of you that are going to be listening in the future, as this is posted on YouTube and on Facebook. I want to thank you. If the conversation tonight speaks to you and you think that there's somebody that would benefit from hearing it, feel free to share and post any comments or questions for us. I will get back and respond to you. I do want to let you know as I wrap up this evening, also, I'll be back again next Tuesday. I'll be by myself. I know you guys like it when I have guests, so you don't have to just stare at my face all evening. But we'll be back next week. And next week, we're going to be talking about the idea of when strength becomes the problem. When strength becomes the problem, what I'm going to be speaking to there with that is the idea of pride, the role that pride and white knuckling plays in our recovery when we try to hang on and deal with things for ourselves, and when we're not willing to ask for help and to reach out. That's what we'll be talking about next week. Be back to join me next week. Bring your questions. And again, I thank everybody for being here with us tonight. I'll see you next week.